let's
Yeah.
let's get started. So, I'm going to do a lot of talking here and talking and reading, but we'll do the best that we can. So here's my introduction. Hi, Ricky. Here's my introduction. Chelm is an actual town in southeastern Poland, but in Jewish folklore, it's an imaginary city inhabited by fools who imagine that they are actually the wisest of all men and women. In a typical Helm story, the people are presented with some difficulty or challenge, and they wind up settling on the absolute dumbest solution that is imaginable. Right? Tales of the wise men of Helm have entertained Jewish readers for generations and are among the best known tales of Eastern European Jewry. There's collections, certainly Shalom Aleichem has a collection and was the basis of many of this, Tevi the Milkman stories from the same genre. Isaac Bashevis Singer has a collection of stories of the wise men of Chelm, and on and on and on. So the historical background, if you will, is that Chelm is a town, like we said, in southeastern Poland, but of course the boundaries and the demarcation lines changed so often in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So the two areas that specifically are related to here are Galicia and Lithuania, right? And we
Okay.
talk of the Galicianas and
Just
we
go to the
talk of the
corner.
Litvaks,
Look on a
right?
new picture.
The Galicianas and the
Your
Litvaks.
picture.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Litvaks, the Lithuanians, are the well, you know what? I should probably start with the Galicianas. The Galicianas from Galicia, which was the Polish-Ukrainian area, were, for all intents and purposes, what we kind of refer to generically as the Hasidim. Okay, so all the tales of the Hasidim and the Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe Nachmans and all that, that's their world. Certainly they were what we would call Orthodox Jews, but they weren't the intellectuals. They certainly weren't the aristocracy. They were much more based in a folkish or folklorish interpretation of Jewish law and Jewish practice. They had their own stories. They had their own mises about their rebbes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we think of the Galicianas as being warm and friendly and devoted to outreach and whatever. And the classic distinction in the folklore sense between the Galicianas and the Litvaks is that the Galicianas preferred their gefilte fish to be sweet. Okay?
Blah.
And the Litvaks, the Lithuanians, who are much more what we would technically call the ultra orthodox. Okay, the ones who are much more strict in their observation. They some of you might have heard the term the depending on how you pronounce it, either in Hebrew or in Yiddish, either the mitnagdim or the misnagdim, right?
Mhm.
Which basically the that word means the opponents. Okay, so the Hasidim are the ones that we tell all these stories about, and they have all the legends, and they did all the outreach. The Misnagdim were the ones who kept to themselves. They isolated. They were devoted to halacha, devoted to the letter of the law, if you will. The intellectuals. They focused on study and analytical debate, and that, and and again, because it was so important, they wanted their gefilte fish to be as as straight as possible, as simple and basic as possible, without adding anything that would sweeten it up. Right?
Okay.
Okay. So that's some of the historical stuff. Then this is another way of approaching it. Again, before we get into reading too many of the stories. Okay. For generations, Jewish readers, this is from a presentation that I made a number of years ago. For generations, Jewish readers have enjoyed the tales of the wise men of Chelm, a world where the wise are foolish and the townspeople believe in all of their schemes. The wise men of Chelm may be fools, but they're fools of a very sweet nature, and they manage to convey profound wisdom even with their silly antics. In real life, Chelm, as we said, is a sizable town, or was a sizable town in eastern Poland, on the banks of a river near the Ukrainian border, not far from the city of Lublin, which was certainly a center of very, very traditional Jewish study. Jews have lived in Chelm since the Middle Ages. The city prospered significantly in the 1500s, and it became a center of trade and commerce. Jews were key players in Chelm's industry. The Jewish community in Chelm was one of the largest and most influential in all of Poland during the Renaissance. An example of a wise men of Chelm story. Okay. Do you know what a malamed is? A malamed is a teacher, especially an itinerant teacher, someone who goes from village to village, shtetl to shtetl, teaches a lesson, probably only knew one or two lessons, and there are lots of stories about that. But he would go, and if there was a family that had a bar mitzvah kid that needed training, he might stay in town for a month or so and train the bar mitzvah kid, and then move on to the next village, whatever. Okay.
Okay.
So a Malamed came to Chelm and told his wife that if he was Rothschild, he'd actually wind up being richer than Rothschild. How can that be? Asked his wife. If you were Rothschild, you'd both have the same great fortune. Yes, said the Malamed, but I do a little bit of teaching on the side. Okay, that's a Chelm Malamed story. Okay, later years saw political upheaval in Chelm and its area as the city became first a part of Austria, then Russia, then subject to rebellions from Poles who agitated for independence. Anti-Semitism increased. There were waves of pogroms in Chelm and their area. 1648, 1649. There were the famous or the infamous Chmielnicki pogroms, and the pogroms led to the deaths to at least 100,000 Jews and the destruction of about 300 Jewish communities in that region.
Wow.
Chelm reverted back to Polish rule in 1918. The city grew rapidly, and once again, Chelm's Jews were a key part of the town's economic development. They worked as merchants, buying and selling livestock. They developed a large Jewish printing industry and a thriving Jewish cultural and religious life. There are still collections that you can find of Jewish books, especially prayer books or sacred texts, that were printed in Chelm.
Wow.
Another example of a story. Which is more important, the sun or the moon? A citizen of Chelm asked the rabbi. What a silly question, replied the rabbi. The moon, of course. It shines at night when we really need it. Who needs the sun to shine when it's already broad daylight outside?
Gee.
Or another one. Right?
Wow.
Beryl was the gabbai. The gabbai was the caretaker of the synagogue in Chelm. Each morning he would walk through the streets of Chelm, rapping on the shutters of the Jewish homes, waking people, Yidden, Yidden, time to get up for morning prayers. But Beryl got older. He became more and more difficult to make his rounds through the town. At last, the citizens of Chelm came up with a brilliant solution. They took the shutters down off of all the townspeople's homes and filled Beryl's bedroom with them. This way, without even leaving his house, he could knock on every shutter in town.
Mm.
Given the vibrancy of Chelm's Jewish life, it might seem surprising that the town became associated with tales of foolishness. Indeed, for generations, Jews enjoyed many of the tales without identifying Chelm as their setting. It seems, according to the scholars, that they have their origin in a collection of German stories originating in 1597 called the Schildberg Tales, named after a fictional village that was inhabited by fools. For generations, the Schildberg Tales were enjoyed by Jews and non-Jews alike in their original German. And then around 1700, they were translated into Yiddish, which of course anybody who spoke Yiddish could understand German, and most people who understood a little bit of German and also had a Hebrew background could understand the Yiddish. Okay? So for years then, Yiddish versions of the tales continued to identify the protagonists as Christians, living in an imaginary town of Schildberg, not Chelm. And apparently, it wasn't until 1887 that there was an edition printed in the city of Lvov in Poland, Lvov, that identified the characters as being Jews and living in a town called Chelm. They were looking for a typical Eastern Eastern European Jewish community, and Chelm probably seemed like a good choice. The book was this is 1887. The book was called Der Chelmer Chochem, The Wise People of Chelm. The only surviving copy is housed today in the National Library of Israel in Jerusalem.
Ah,
Okay, all right. Stories about the wise men of Chelm continued to be published in Yiddish, became a key component of Jewish culture. There was a cantor in the 1890s by the name of Menachem Kipnis, who wrote about music for Yiddish newspapers. He wrote a series of comic articles for the Warsaw-based Yiddish newspaper. It's called Heint, Today, in which he claimed that he was reporting ridiculous events live from Chelm. The column became so popular that it said a Jewish woman actually living in Chelm wrote to him back in Vilna and asked him or begged him to stop writing about Chelm because she feared that his comic dispatches would prevent her daughter from ever finding a husband once the potential young men found out that she was from Chelm. Chelm's history continues, and then sadly, in the time of the Holocaust, almost all of Chelm's Jewish residents were deported to Sobibor, and when the town was liberated in July of 1944, there were only 15 Jews who remained alive at that point. Conclusion: the beautiful Jewish life that existed in Chelm and across all of Yiddish-speaking Europe today lives on in these stories that we tell about Chelm. The comic antics of Chelm's imaginary fools have entertained generations of Jewish readers and continue to do so today, which brings us to this moment. Okay? All right. So that's the historical background. Now we can really chuckle some more. This what we sent out really come from two sources. There's a collection of Jewish folk tales that was edited by Leo Schwartz. And the first couple of pages, and I apologize if it looks like some of the words were cut off. We'll do our best to fill them in with each other. We'll read some of those stories that are collected in Schwartz's The Jewish Caravan. And then there's another collection that I just found, of course, through Rabbi Google, and with a few other selections, and and we'll have fun with it. So I'm going to race through it. Try to follow along, or if you have, stop me if anybody has any questions. But again, the idea, the notion, and the goal was in times of now we're not cold compared to where Steve is, or to compared to where our relatives are in Detroit, Cleveland, or Buffalo, but we don't have that cold. But this is the time of year when there's not a lot of light. There's more darkness than there is light. There's more cold than there is warmth in the Jewish world. And as we look forward to Hanukkah, we look forward to bringing the light of faith and hope into our lives.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah. Could I just make a comment?
of course, of
Oh,
course.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And this is not directly relating to Helm, but the whole issue of Litvox versus Galicianers really touches me because my dad considered himself a Litvak. He was sort of a quasi Litvak because Belarus was almost Lithuania. So
Uh-huh.
so I guess the Belarusian Jews kind of consider themselves Litvaks, you know.
Right.
And my mother's family came from that area of Galicia, and my father was constantly ribbing my mother about it. Oh, Galicianers do this and Galicianers do that, and anytime she, like my father would put, salt on watermelon, and she would say, "Oh, that's the way the Litvogs do it."
Oh yeah, the Hatfields and the McCoys
Something weird for them.
had nothing
And
on the Galicianas and the Lidbox. Right, right.
and and
Um,
and at the risk of possibly, I don't know if Sunette is still listening here, but just I just wanted to point out that the Southern African Jews are solidly Litvak, and so
uh-huh.
that
That's
that is a
true.
point of special pride of the
That's true.
the South African Jews and Rhodesia Jews. They are
Right,
these Litvaks. You're not going to find a Gauls among them.
right.
Okay, but yeah, that's just my sense worth about the
Yeah.
Gaussianers and the
I mean,
Litvaks.
and it's an interesting insight, I guess, and perspective. In all seriousness, of looking at Jewish history, and Chaim Potok, the late Chaim Potok, does a lot of this in some of his writing. Is as going from one generation to another, one era to another, t- focusing on some of these cultural tensions, whether it's Litvak Galiciana, whether it's Ashkenazi Sephardi, whether it's in our day, whether it's reform conservative slash versus Orthodox traditional, but whether or not there's tension or whether or not there's acceptance and respect one to the other is this conscious. Potok calls it culture conflict, and cites all of those or a lot of those in his in the way that he looks at Jewish history. But anyway, that's a sidebar. Okay. All right. So how it all began, according to the stories of Chelm. In heaven's nurseries, there is an angel who is entrusted with the care and distribution of all newly born souls. One day, the Holy One sent this angel to scatter two bags filled with souls through all parts of the earth. One bag contained the souls of wise men, the other the souls of fools. So the angel flew over the face of the earth and scattered the souls in equal measure. First a handful of the wise souls, then a handful of the others, equal measure. Throughout the world, therefore, there was an equal number of wise men and fools. When the angel was passing over the district upon which was later built the renowned city of Chelm, that angel met with a mishap. His large wings were caught in a very high mountain, covered with trees and brush. As he attempted to loosen himself, he fell, and the bag full of wise souls was ripped wide open. Down fell all those souls, sages, teachers, scholars to be. In the course of time, these souls became men, and they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city. Let us call it Helm." That's the name of the city today. And those pioneer builders were the ancestors of all the Helmites, famed for their wisdom throughout the world. So that's how it came to be that they from all the souls of all the wise men that were supposed to be distributed equally, along with the foolish, but Helm only got the the wise. All right, so they have to build their town. The Helmites began the task of building their city. Off they went to the forest. It was on the very mountain upon which the angel's bag of souls was torn. I don't know. To cut down the trees, they went up the mountain, cut down the required number of trees, and sawed them into beams. Now they had to get the beams to the bottom of the mountain. The beams were thick and long, and what do you think? Something, I don't know, heavy. 10 men were required to carry one beam from the top of the mount down to the plain below. This was no mean task. It lasted many months. During the third month, a Litvak, a Lithuanian Jew, passed by the mountain and observed the Helmites carrying the beams on their backs to the bottom of the mountain. He said to them, obviously they're Galicianas, right? "Why do you work so hard to get the beams down to the plain? It would be easier simply to roll down the beams, and they all of and they all of themselves would reach the plain below." The Helmites got into a huddle and held a meeting to discuss the advice of this Lithuanian fellow. They deliberated for 7 days and 7 nights. They made two important decisions. First, that there apparently must be wise men also among the Lithuanian Jews, not just amongst themselves. And secondly, that they would follow the advice of this clever fellow. For why, after all, should they labor so hard to carry the beams on their shoulders when it was possible to get them to the bottom of the mountain with a mere kick of the foot? So what did the Helmites do? They immediately went to the plain, took all those beams which they had brought down, carried them straightway to the top of the mountain, and then rolled them down with a mere kick of their feet. Okay. Famous one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Skip the one about the cemetery. How Helm was enlarged. The Helmites increased and multiplied. The city became overpopulated, so that it became necessary to enlarge it and to build new homes. But this was not an easy task, for that mountain, where the angel's bag of souls was ripped, spread out all over the neighboring land. Not an acre was free for building. The Helmites convened and became absorbed in endless talk. Several remarkable plans were suggested, plans such as only the wisdom of the Helmites could conceive. At length they made this decision. The whole citizenry, men, women, children, should go out to the mountain and push it back in order to clear the ground for the construction of new homes. Everyone then ran to the mountain. They grasped it with their hands and arms and pressed their bodies against it. They pushed and pushed. Sweat covered their faces. They pushed and pushed until it became very hot. Then they removed their coats and put them alongside the mountain. Somewhat cooled, they renewed their pushing. While they were exerting themselves in this manner, some thieves passed by and noticed the pile of coats. They grabbed them and hurried off. The Helmites pushed with all their might for a long time. Then they grew weary and stopped for a rest. They turned around to see how far they had moved the mountain, and they shouted joyfully, "Look how far we are from the place we started. We can't even see our coats." All right. Can I have a volunteer to read the community center piece? Someone want to try? Going
I
once,
didn't, I didn't print
going
them out.
twice. Okay, that's all. You're excused, Gail. That's all right. Anybody want to read? Some of you are muted, so I don't know if you're saying yes or not, or just listening to the stories. Okay, I'll go on. I'll go on.
All right. I can if
Okay.
you can, Rabbi.
I've got him on the
Who's that,
screen, but which
Bonnie?
one?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. If you would, please.
sure. Okay.
Which one?
The community center.
the
I've got it,
community
Ricky.
center, right.
I've got to get the whole booklet here. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Every day, Helm began to look more and more like a model city. And now that each citizen had a home and a plot of ground, the Helmites talked of a large school and community center that would be a credit to their wisdom and an adornment to the city. Up to this time, they had used their homes for prayer and study. They went to the same mountain, cut down the required number of trees, chopped them into long beams, and rolled them down. When they had carried the beams to the city, alas, they discovered something they had not reckoned on. The streets, which were lined with houses, were very narrow indeed, only half the width of the beams. When they lifted the beams on their shoulders and, like soldiers on the march, tried to pass into the street which led to the site chosen for the community center, both ends of the lines were halted by the houses. The beams were longer than the width of the street, and they could not pass. The Helmites called a meeting on the spot. They deliberated and debated and reached this decision. The houses on both sides of the street must be burnt down so that the street would be wide enough to pass through with the beams.
It's a little bit on the next page.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
This they did, and when all the beams had been carried to the site of the community center, they returned, jubilant with their success, and rebuilt the houses.
Destroyed houses. Yeah, right. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Wise, very wise, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Says whom?
All right. So here's a famous one down near the starts at the bottom of the page. Light from heaven. The Helmites were convinced that no city was worthy of the name unless it were lit up on the dark nights preceding the full moon. What shall we do? They asked, to provide light on nights when the heavens are covered by clouds. They convened in the community center for 7 days and 7 nights. They put their heads together. They debated and talked. All the wisdom in all the heads of these wise men was taxed by the problem. Finally, they devised a brilliant trick. When it was full moon, they would place a vessel full of water in the midst of the marketplace. They would get the moon into the vessel, spread many sheets and mats over it, and tie them with strong ropes. To ensure its safekeeping, they would seal the knots with the seal of the chief officials, the rabbi and the dayanim. The dayanim are the judges, like the elders of the community. Right? So they in this way they would capture the reflection of the moon on one fine clear moonlit evening. They would catch the reflection of the moon in the water of in the bucket, all right, and then cover it and tie it up. When the end of the month came around and nights became dark, all the citizens gathered in the marketplace to take the moon out of the vessel and suspend it above the city so that it would illumine the streets. They broke the seals, untied the cords, took the sheets and mats from the vessel, and it was dark. Terror seized the hearts of all the Helmites. The moon was missing. The moon has been stolen, 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 they lamented. Too bad. For if it had not been stolen, the streets of the city would have been illumined, even on the very dark nights preceding full moon. Got to make sure that we read the one about the rabbi on the next page. Again, I'll ask for a volunteer. Someone want to tell us about the rabbi?
Oh, Ricky.
I can read, yeah.
Can you read it,
Helm was
Ricky?
blessed with, yeah. Helm was blessed with a learned rabbi, a sage worthy of the famous city. To our day, nobody has been able to discover whether or not the rabbi had
Ahead.
a head. Okay. The
Ahead.
question, yeah, the question arose only after the rabbi suddenly disappeared from Helm. The whole community went out to find him. They searched and searched and at length found a corpse without a head. Was it the rabbi? Nobody could really say. If the rabbi had a head, the corpse was certainly not the rabbi's. And if they could prove the rabbi did not have a head, then it was certainly their rabbi.
Dilemma. Big dilemma.
Hmm. The inquiry began. First, they questioned the beadle who used to serve the rabbi every day. He said, I don't know. The rabbi may have his soul rest in peace, was always wrapped in his prayer shawl, and I saw him only under the prayer shawl.
Meaning
Uh,
couldn't see his head.
right.
Okay. If he
They
had
inquired of the community bath keeper who served the rabbi in the
in the
blah,
bath, or in
in
the
the bath
mikvah, right.
on Friday and holiday evenings. He answered, I don't know. The
The rabbi.
rabbi, peace upon his soul, always took a place in the highest bench, which was completely hidden by the stream. I saw only the lower part of his legs. Finally, the Helmites inquired of the rabbi's wife. No other woman in town could match her wisdom. One day, it is told, the rabbi asked her whether he gave the goldfish fresh water. Ah, no, she replied. They haven't as yet something the water. Softened,
Drink,
well,
finish the water that I gave.
finish the water that I gave them yesterday. Well,
Yeah.
she certainly would know. She said, I do not know that he had a nose, for on Friday and holiday evenings he used to prepare snuff for himself, but whether or not he had a head, I cannot say. So even today it is not clear to the helmets whether or not the rabbi had a head.
Hmm. That's my legacy, whether or not the rabbis had a head. Few incident. There are no words to describe the wisdom of the scribe, the sofer, who kept the I don't know offices of Helm. He, like the beadle and the Rav, the rabbi was a shining light. And a few incidents will prove this. Once a group of Helmites visited the scribe at his home. They found him at his desk writing a letter. Not an ordinary letter, but one that could be written only in Helm. The paper was as large as a poster. The letters of each word were at least a foot long. Why are you writing such large letters? The Helmites asked. The scribe answered, I'm not writing to you. I'm writing a letter to one an uncle or someone who is deaf and dumb. On another occasion, the scribe was walking to the next town with a heavy pack on his back. A farmer who was riding by pulled up and invited him to share his seat. The scribe gratefully accepted the invitation, but to the farmer's surprise, did not take the pack off of his back. Why don't you take the pack and put it in the back in the wagon? Then you can ride comfortably, suggested the farmer. The scribe answered, You, my friend, were good enough to invite me to share your seat. Would it be fair also to add the burden of my pack?
Oh,
And then,
Lord.
then the classic way that any collection of these is answered. If by now, dear reader, you are not convinced of the renown of Helm and the wit and the wisdom of the Helmites, you may someday have the good fortune of meeting one of them in person, and he will convince you. All right. As Josh told the men's club breakfast this morning, we're still looking for people to put their names into nomination to serve on the board. Maybe we can get some, descendants of Helm. Right. Okay. I think we still have a few more that were in this collection. 3 short samples of Helm stories. It says, which is more important, the sun or the moon? A citizen of Helm asked his rabbi. What a silly
What is it?
question, snapped the cleric. The moon, of course, it shines at night when we really need it, but who needs the sun to shine when it is already broad daylight? We saw
Right.
that one. We
Yes.
also have seen the one about that he asked his wife
Russian.
about being a Rothschild, right? Okay, all
Yeah.
right, and then rolling the stones or rolling the logs or whatever. Okay. Then this is a famous one about a longer. It says a longer tale of Chelm, the snow in Chelm. Okay, Chelm was a village of fools, fools young and old. One night, someone spied the moon and reflected in a barrel of water. The people of Chelm imagined it had fallen in. They sealed the barrel so that the moon would not escape. This is similar to the one we just read in the other. When the barrel was opened in the morning, the moon wasn't there. The villagers decided it had been stolen. They sent for the police, and when the thief couldn't be found, the fools of Chelm cried and moaned. Once on a Hanukkah night, the snow fell all evening. It covered the whole of Chelm like a silver tablecloth. The moon shone, the stars twinkled, the snow shimmered like pearls and diamonds. Of all the fools of Chelm, the most famous were its 7 elders. Because they were the village's oldest and greatest fools, they ruled in Chelm. They had white beards and high foreheads from too much thinking. That evening, the 7 elders were sitting and pondering, wrinkling their foreheads. The city was in need of money. They did not know where to get it. Suddenly, the oldest of them, Gronim the great fool, Gronim is considered, Groinim is considered one of is like the Hasidic Rebbe. He's the really he's the town's chucham. He's the most important. Okay, Groinim the great fool exclaimed, "The snow is silver." And another shouted out, "I see pearls in the snow." A third called out, "I see diamonds." It became clear to the elders of Chelm that a treasure had fallen from the sky.
Right.
But soon they began to worry. The people of Chelm liked to go walking, and they would most likely, certainly, trample the treasure. What was to be done? Well, another one of the 7 elders, that silly Tudras, had an idea. Let's send a messenger to knock on all the windows and let the people know that they must remain in their houses until all the silver, all the pearls, and all the diamonds are safely gathered up. For a while, the elders were satisfied. They rubbed their hands in approval of the clever idea. But then Dopey Lekesh called out in consternation. The messenger himself, going house to house to house, will trample the treasure. The elders realized that Lekish was right, and again they wrinkled their high foreheads in an effort to solve the problem. "I've got it!" exclaimed Shmerel the ox. Tell us, pleaded the elders. "The messenger must not go on foot. He must be carried on a table so that his feet will not tread on the precious snow." Everyone was delighted with Shmerel the ox's solution. The elders clapped their hands, admiring their own wisdom. The elders immediately sent to the kitchen for Gimple the errand boy and stood him on a table. Now, who was going to carry the table? It was lucky that in the kitchen there were Tridle the cook, Beryl the potato peeler, Yukel the salad mixer, and Yontel, who was in charge of the community goat. All 4 were ordered to lift up the table on which Gimple the fool stood. Each one took hold of a leg. On top stood Gimple, grasping a wooden hammer with which to tap on the villagers' windows, and off they went. At each window, Gimple knocked with the hammer and called out, "No one leave your house tonight. A treasure has fallen from the sky. It is forbidden to step on it." The people of Chelm obeyed the elders and remained in their houses all night. Meanwhile, the elders themselves sat up, trying to figure out how to make the best use of the treasure, all the diamonds and the ones that had been gathered up. Silly Tudras proposed that they sell it and buy a goose, which would lay golden eggs. Thus, the community would be provided with a steady income. Dopey Lekish had another idea. Why not buy eyeglasses that make things look bigger for all the inhabitants of Chelm? Then the houses, the streets, the stores would all look bigger. And of course, if Helm looked bigger, then it would be bigger. It would no longer be a village, but it would be a big city, famous. There were other equally clever ideas. But while they were weighing their various plans, morning came, and the sun rose. The elders looked out of the window, and alas, they saw that the snow had been trampled. The heavy boots of the table carriers had destroyed the treasure. The elders of Helm clutched at their white beards and admitted to one another that they had made a mistake. Perhaps, they reasoned, 4 others should have carried the 4 men who had carried the table that held Gimple, the errand boy. And after long deliberations, the elders decided that if next Hanukkah a treasure would again fall down from the sky, that is exactly what they would do. Although the villagers remained without a treasure, they were full of hope for the next year, and they praised their elders, who they knew would always be counted on to find a way, no matter how difficult the problem actually was.
I thought the snow was going to melt and all the treasures were going to melt
Oh,
away.
yeah, you could tell the story that way too.
That's too simple.
I have two others that I would share that were not sent to you. Just have to make sure that my page works here. Okay, all right. A young scholar of Helm, innocent in the ways of earthly matters, was stunned one morning when his wife gave birth. Pell-mell he ran to the rabbi. "Rabbi," he blurted out, "an extraordinary thing has happened. Please explain it to me. My wife has just given birth, although we have only been married for 3 months. How can this be? Everybody knows that it takes 9 months for a baby to be born." The rabbi was a world-renowned sage. He put on his silver-rimmed spectacles and furrowed his brow reflectively. "My son," he said, "I see you haven't the slightest idea about such matters, nor can you make the simplest calculation. Let me ask you, have you lived with your wife for 3 months?" "Yes, Rabbi." "Has she lived with you for 3 months?" "Yes, Rabbi." "Together have you lived 3 months?" "Yes." "Then what's the total? 3 months
6,
plus 3 plus 3?
6.
That's 9 months, Rabbi." "Then why did you come to me and bother me with such a foolish question?"
I missed the third. What was the third 3 months? I missed that.
Have you lived with your wife? Has she
Yes.
lived with you? And have you lived together for 3 months?
Oh, together. Okay, that was the one I missed.
Okay. All right. A young man from Chelm who was studying to be a sage, a rabbi, felt very much troubled. So he went to the chief rabbi and asked him, "Perhaps you can tell me, why is there no hair growing on my chin?" Now, it couldn't be heredity, or could it? Look at my father. You know what a fine, thick beard he has. The chief rabbi reflectively stroked his beard for a while, and then his face lit up. "Perhaps you take after your mother," he suggested. "That must be it, since my mother has no beard," cried the youth with admiration. "What a great sage you are, Rabbi."
Jeez.
Of course, we're not saying how old the youth was either.
That's dos is the emes, as we say. You know. So did we achieve the goal of bringing a few chuckles and
Yes.
smiles?
Yes, you did.
Smiles?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Very, very welcome. It's lovely literature, as compared to the collections like Buber's collection of the tales of the Hasidim, which almost all have, I guess, what we would call a moral, or
Moral ending.
some kind of
Yeah.
a lesson that's taught with it. The purpose of these is strictly entertainment. It's strictly
Can I
entertainment.
tell you? Can I tell you my favorite Hasidim story with the moral at the end?
Sure, sure.
What's
Tori.
that?
All right. The rabbi's got a bunch of kids with him, and they went someplace, and it's now
Say goodbye.
Shabbat.
We need to
They're
say
not-
goodbye. We have an appointment to go
Oh,
to.
okay.
Okay,
See you
Mike, I
soon.
do need to talk to you about something. I'll give a call or a text or
That's
something.
fine. And we'll be on the road, but I'll have my phone with me.
It doesn't have to be today. It's all right.
Okay.
We got you.
Okay. Take care.